Board.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Creating Balance with Jan and Lori. We are here today with our amazing colleague, Carol Richard. And in our group, you guys were saying that you wanted help with sleep. So here we go. We've already got her for you. Now, Carol is an accredited certified EFT practitioner for Prince Edward Island, Canada. And she was introduced to energy work back in 2010 when she first learned about Reiki. And over the years, she has kept researching and learning different energy modalities. Back in 2017, she discovered EFT, and since then, she became certified in EFT and decided to focus her work on sleep since she struggled with sleep issues herself in the past. And she is also a certified sleep science coach. So, welcome, Carol. Yay!
Thanks.
Hello, Carol. We're so happy you're here.
Yes, I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. So, Carol, share with us, why did you choose to focus on sleep?
Well, this is part of my story that I share with most people. I started, my focus with sleep is because I realized how important it is. And I know that because I struggled with sleep myself. Back in 2015 is when my struggles started. And they started because I had a very stressful job. And at first it was a night here and there, like most people, right? We miss a night of sleep here and there. But then by 2016, I was taking sleeping pills because there was no way I could sleep without them. And so that continued for probably a whole year to a point where I couldn't sleep at all. Even with the pills, I was at the point where I wasn't sleeping. And so my doctor said it was time for me to stop working. So even though I didn't want to, because it felt so wrong to not go to work, because that's what we do as women, we just keep going, I had to stop working. And so then that was April 10th, 2017. Probably the worst day of my life, but also the best day of my life, because that's when I started changing my life. And that's when I found EFT, got certified. And then when I was certified and, they say, pick your niche, I was like, well, it's going to be sleep. It has to be sleep because sleep is so important. But what I want to say is when you don't sleep, what people don't always kind of put together with the lack of sleep is how it affects our immune system. Like I was getting sick and I hadn't been on antibiotics for like 5 years. And all of a sudden I needed them every month because I couldn't get over a sinus infection or I couldn't get over something. Well, my lack of sleep was really affecting my immune system. It was affecting how I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't focus on anything. It was causing fights within my family because you're so tired and overwhelmed and can't function because you have no sleep. It causes weight gain. And I think for me, one of the stories that I tell people too is we don't realize how we're sleep deprived. We get in a car and we're driving somewheres. That's just as bad as being drunk. And one day I was at work and I went for a walk and all of a sudden I saw this car and I'm like, oh, look at that. That looks like my car. Someone else has the same car. And then I went by and it was my car. And I had no memory of parking it there. So can you imagine how dangerous I was on the road? Yet, but I didn't know. Like you don't know what you don't know until you know it, right? So that just clued me in that it was time to change my life. And ever since I have, so I'm now a sleep science coach. I am obsessed with sleep. I make sure I get 8 hours of sleep at night because I know how important it is to have this balance in your life. And without sleep, you don't have it. So that's why I chose sleep and why sleep is so important for me.
So, Carol, what's some of the reasons that you're finding out that people are starting to have sleep issues?
Well, that's a loaded question in a way because so many people have different reasons. So the first thing I want to say on that is if you're having struggles with sleep, you should go see a doctor because there are sleep disorders that you need a doctor for. However, I like Dr. Michael Bruce, who's the sleep doctor. I follow him closely because he has so much good information on sleep, but he talked about disordered sleep. So disordered sleep is when your sleep gets affected, but it's not a sleep disorder. So that's what I kind of help people with is that disordered sleep. The common for everybody is usually stress, usually. And so that can happen when it's a specific event that causes that stress and then your sleep struggles start. Or for other people, it's just accumulated stress from their lives, right? So An example of a specific event, I'll share 2 client stories, and I have permission to share their stories. So no worries, I'm not breaking confidentiality. One of them had surgery, and 7 years later, she still was not sleeping.
Wow.
And she knew it had started with the surgery. There was a lot of complication, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of things that happened since that surgery, but she hasn't slept really since then. So when we started our work together, like we dug through all that and all those beliefs and events. And it was session 4 or 5 in our work. She was like, this is going to work. Like she started believing that EFT was going to help her sleep, and she started sleeping better. After 4 sessions, she wasn't back to like normal sleep, but she's on her way. The other one was a specific event as well. And she wasn't really sure what it was, but when we started talking and we did some work, I asked her, well, what happened 6 months prior to you not sleeping? Because usually there's that event or something. And she had lost someone in her family, an elderly person. And so, but for her, it wasn't really the grief, because the grief can be part of the reason people don't sleep. But for her, it was more having to deal with the taxes and the selling of the house and all those events, and helping the other elderly person in that relationship deal with all that paperwork and the stress of taking that on. Once we worked on that, then her sleep came back. So those are kind of different ways for like specific event, right? But when we look at people that say, I don't know why I don't sleep, I just don't sleep. We accumulate stress in our day, every day, and it kind of builds up. I like to say is like, picture us as a cup and start putting a stress in there, and you'll reach this point where you're in fight or flight all the time. Like our nervous system has like 2 states, right? It's got this fight or flight, dysregulated, full of anxiety, full of emotions, full of stress, or we have the rest and digest state. And in this state, we're regulated, we feel calm, we're relaxed, life flows. We spend our life in fight or flight. We should really spend it in rest and digest, but we don't, because of society, because of cell phones, because of the news, because of whatever. So it's teaching people that don't have a specific reason how to use tapping to calm their nervous system so they can get into that rest and digest, and then usually they'll fall asleep. So it's different. Every client, every person, they have a different reason, but the common is stress. That's usually.
I'll tell you, when I tend to not have a problem sleeping most of my life, but the worst time I had was when, I know this is going to be hard to believe that I'm this old, but perimenopause, during menopause, and just getting into postmenopause. I think I averaged 4 hours of sleep a night for about 8 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And it was absolutely awful. I didn't know how. I mean, I would start falling asleep driving to work in the morning. But, and I hear a lot of these women going through this with their hormones during that time period. Do you see a lot of that with women, hormonal issues?
Yeah, I do see some of that. So with tapping, we deal with all our nervous system. So hormone is one of those. They might need to go to the doctor to get their hormones under control, but we can use the tapping for the stress of it, the feeling old, the what I call the spirituality side of it, like, where's my life taking me? What's my life purpose? I'm now going into menopause, that I like all this stuff. So we use tapping for that. However, the hormonal part, once you reduce the stress, the hormones usually get better, but that needs a doctor to kind of evaluate that.
Yeah, that's a good point that you bring up, because I think I wish I would have known about EFT when I was going through that. Because yes, you do. You're going through that emotional thing because of your hormones, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is it. My life is going to end, and you know, there's nothing to look forward to. I'm going through menopause, this and that, and this and that.
Yeah.
And now I look back on it, and it's like, I'm so glad that I'm where I'm at now, because you know, post-menopause, you're like, whew, glad that's over with. But boy, did I grow from it, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. You adjust to those changes. And pretty grateful for it at that time. But yeah, so that's interesting. So a lot of you women out there in our group that are going through that perimenopause, you know, first of all, of course, see your doctor and see if there's anything that can be done. But then, you know, Carol's somebody to keep in mind to contact and, you know, see if she can tap through the emotional side of it that you may be
Emotional
going
side.
through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're going to actually have a second part to this video, but before we close out this video, do you have any like quick techniques or tips that you can share with people before we
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So people will always say, well, how do I make this work to go to sleep, right? So how do I use tapping? Well, there's different ways. And there's not a cookie cutter solution. It depends on the night. So I do different strategies depending on the night. But the first thing ever is you just have to sit there and tune in with yourself. I never put my head on the pillow unless I know that I'm in the rest and digest state. And how that, right? So you tune into your body. You just kind of like sitting on the side of your bed, ask yourself, what do I feel right now? Do I feel calm? Do I feel anxious? If I feel anxious, even though I feel anxious right now, I accept this is how I feel. And get rid of that anxiety, that overwhelm, that pressure, that to-do list that's too big. So that's step one. Just tune in with yourself. What are you feeling? Not a step two, and then I kind of go into, okay, so you've fallen asleep and now you're waking up through the night. So it's normal to wake up through the night. People think if I wake up, it's a bad thing, but it's not. If you look at the sleep cycles, you know, they last 90 minutes, but in between each cycle, we get into that light sleep. That's usually when we wake up to use the bathroom, in that light sleep. If you go back to bed and you're falling asleep again, not an issue. It's when you get into that light sleep and then your brain starts going. That's the issue. So what to do then? Well, there's different strategies, right? You could, so first of all, and I'll give them in the order that I would do them. So the first thing I would do if that would happen is I would lay in my bed and I would mentally tap on myself. So I wouldn't physically lift my arm, but I would just send the intention, and with my eyes closed, I would count to 7 on each point. And just by doing that, you're taking your mind away from everything else and you're kind of tapping on the point, and energy goes wherever it goes. That's why you can do distance treatment. You can do all this stuff because the intention will still go to the points. If that's not enough and it's not closing, is not shutting down your mind and putting you to sleep, I lay on my side and I just kind of put my hand and I just gently tap. You don't have to tap hard. So just gently tap, going through the points. And sometimes I'll start saying like, this bed is so comfortable. Like I can feel myself relaxing, and kind of do a body scan while you're tapping. So kind of orienting, tapping, bringing yourself back in your body, laying in bed. And usually, and I've had people say like, I can't get to the second round because my arm is just too flimsy and then I just fall asleep. Yeah. So there's that. But what if it's a night where what's on your mind won't shut down? Like your mind is active and you just can't shut it down. Well, you have a choice. You can keep laying there for 3 hours and play it in your mind, or you can actually leave the bedroom, go sit somewhere, do the tapping, actually go through the event that is causing you that stress. Take 20 minutes, 30 minutes, go back to bed and go to sleep. So a lot of people say, I don't want to bring up events when I'm going to sleep because I don't want it to affect my sleep. I agree. Unless it's going to stop your sleep anyway, then tap through it. So those are kind of the 3 different strategies that I have for if you wake up through the night, or that check-in. That check-in is so important. Like I will ask myself, is there anything that's, and you listen, like the voices will pop up. Is there anything that's going to stop me from sleeping? And I have to say, some of the benefits of good sleep, it's really, it changes your life. It creates this balance, you know, like I have so many people say now that I'm sleeping, I'm exercising, I'm just eating better, because all these things follow good sleep. Good sleep is, for me, the number one thing we need to do in order to get there. So yeah, and then step 2, we're going to talk about my 4-part process, which I'm excited to share.
Yeah, you're going to talk about your 4-step process, and you're going to tell people how they can reach you and your upcoming program you're going to be holding.
Yes.
So stay tuned for part 2. We will be back.
Okay.